the Atlanta Community Tool Bank's Tool Training Center. In this short video, I'm going to show you how to build a bat box. You should have received your kit from the tool bank. First, we're going to run into the spray room and we're going to paint all the plywood pieces. I'm going to start out by spraying the inside of all the plywood pieces this black spray paint. It'll be easy to do. Remember, the side that has the grooves cut in it, that's on the inside. The inside of these look good. I'm going to go ahead and spray brown on the outside. Now that our painting is done and dry, we're going to go ahead and build. We're going to start out with the longest of the 2x pieces. You're going to set it down flat like this and look for the black side. You want that black side facing you. Now you got the 2 shorter pieces. Take the 2 shorter pieces, find the black side, and you want that facing the inside. So for this right one, it's going to face that way. For this left one, it's going to face that way. Now take your caulk tube, we're going to cut it open, we're going to put it in our caulk gun, we're going to start putting this together. Cut the tip off, open your caulk gun, insert caulk tube. Sometimes on the caulk tubes you got to puncture it, and sometimes there's a little needle on the end of your caulk gun. You could use that to puncture it. This particular caulk tube, you don't have to puncture it. I'm going to go ahead and get a good bead of caulk all the way around. I relieve the pressure on the caulk gun by pushing that. That'll keep all that caulk from pouring out the end. Okay, now the larger board of the 2. Get the side that has the grooves in it. They're going this way. Want the grooves on this. Grooves need to be going this way. They need to be parallel to this top board. So that means I'm going to flip it over like this. And use any kind of screw gun that you have. You can even use a regular screwdriver if you don't have any type of a driver. 3 screws on the top, 3 on the side, 3 on this side. When you put your second screw in, make sure that this board is flush. Push this board all the way up to the top and get it so it's right flush with that top board and flush on the sides. Okay, it's all flush. I'm going to start with the screw all the way on the top here. Make sure that board stay flush before you put your next screw in. It did. Notice how there's a little squeeze out of the caulk there? Nothing wrong with that. I'm just going to take my finger and run it right down that seam there. Smooth it on out. Now I'm going to do the same thing with this side. Now, let's flip it over. This is actually the inside of the chamber. We're going to have 2 pieces. We've got a piece that's going to go here. We're going to give about a 1/2 inch gap, and then we're going to put another piece right there. That's what it's going to look like when we're done. I'm going to do these one at a time. Make sure that the black side is facing the inside. For me, I did some brown paint on the outside, so I'm going to make sure it's up. Just like before, nice heavy bead. Release the pressure on the caulk gun. Go just like before. Get everything nice and flush on the top there. Make sure this stayed flush. In fact, let's go check it right here. Flush all the way down this way. That feels good. 3 screws. You got your 5-inch board. it's going to go down on the bottom here. You're going to leave about a 1/2-inch gap, air gap for our bats. 2 screws on each side. Now it looks like I got quite a bit of squeeze out on the side, and again, that is okay. I'm just going to take my finger and run down the side to even it all out. Go on either side and squeeze out that caulk. Now I'm going to get a rag to get this caulk off of my finger. Now we're going to put a top on this. It's going to look just like so. We're going to screw that on, and then for our final step, we're going to take this cute little bat, and we're just going to caulk it to the front of our bat house. Don't need much caulk. About like that. Eyeball center, push it down. There we got our bat. I'm just going to use 2 screws. I'm going to flip it around like this so it's easier for me to get to. Now I'm going to center this top. I'm just going to do it by eye. If you're a little bit uncertain, you can always take a tape measure and measure each side. That looks pretty good to me. Now you have a completed bat box. I gave you some tips on how to hang it. And be patient, it might take a season for the bats to show up. Hey everyone, don't go anywhere. My friend Emily Farrell from the Georgia Department of Natural Resources, she's going to talk to us a little bit about bats and give us some really cool, interesting facts. And she might even give us a few tips about how to hang your bat box.
Hi, my name is Emily Farrell and I am with the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. I am a wildlife technician that studies bats, and I'm here to talk to you today about bat conservation in Georgia. So bats are mammals, just like us. They have fur, they give birth to live young, and they are very abundant across the world with over 1,200 species present in continents all over the world. They have a long lifespan, and they can live up to 20 to 30 years old. Another way that bats are more similar to us than many people think is that their wing is actually just like our hand. Their wing is made up of finger bones, just like we have, but their finger bones are very long and skinny, and they have skin that connects all of their finger bones together, and that is what forms their wings. Bats also have a shoulder, elbow, a wrist, a thumb, just like we do, so they're much more similar to people than you may imagine. We have 16 species of bats in Georgia. Some of these species are present year-round, and some are present only during certain parts of the year. Some species migrate through Georgia, and some are only in certain regions of the state for certain habitat preferences, such as on our coastal region on our barrier islands. Many of our bat species in Georgia have very similar life history traits of how they go about the year. Some of our bat species will roost in culverts or caves in the winter, and that is where they will hibernate. Some of our species that are migratory will just pass through the state in the fall, going to somewhere warmer for the winter months like Florida. The species that stay, though, tend to stay in our winter roost sites, our caves and culverts, until late winter, early spring, and they usually emerge around April, say. And at that time, females will become pregnant. And then in May or June, they tend to have their babies that we call pups. And from there, the mothers will stay with the pups over the summer and teach the pups how to fly, and they will help feed them and show them how to get food on their own. And then in the fall, the bats will start thinking about what they're going to do for the winter. So they'll be eating a lot of food, trying to get those fat reserves built up for the winter. The species that are migratory may be moving back through the state again. They returned in the spring, and they're here for the summer, and then in this fall they return to warmer weather. The species that stay, though, for the winter, in the fall they will breed, and then they will look for that winter roost site, that cave or culvert, to go back to for the next winter. Because bats live in such a variety of habitats across the world, they have a variety of food sources that they eat across the world. All of our bats in Georgia eat insects only, and that is it. They don't eat anything else. But in other parts of the world, bats may eat fruit, or they may eat frogs, They also may drink blood, and they may drink nectar and pollinate plants. All of the bat species that eat insects use something called echolocation to navigate their environment and find food. It's a common myth that bats are blind. Bats are actually not blind. They do have pretty good eyesight, surprisingly, but many of our bat species do use echolocation to get around their environments because they are flying at night. For our bats in Georgia, they all use echolocation, and they do this to navigate through a forest and make sure they don't hit anything, and they also use this to look for food. They do this by sending out these call signals, and those call signals bounce off of whatever is around the bats, either a tree or even an insect, and it tells the bat what is there, and the bat can then go hunt that food like an insect or go find a tree to rest in. Because we have bats all over the world that eat a variety of food sources that we talked about, they're able to bring us humans a lot of great resources. And they do this through the seed dispersal that they offer, and that by eating fruits, then they fly somewhere new and they drop those seeds, and that may produce a new plant. And they also do this through pollination. So as we discussed, bats will feed on nectar from flowering plants, and by going to many flowering plants, they're helping to provide a pollination service, just like many other species like butterflies do, and that helps those plants to continue to grow and reproduce. So you may be asking yourself, where do our bats live? They live in a variety of habitats across the world, but in Georgia specifically, they like a few certain places. So they like to have forested areas, especially if there's water nearby. They like to live in hollowed out trees if there's an opening in them. They like to live under tree bark sometimes. They also live in caves, as you know, and they may even be very specific and live in something like Spanish moss on the coast. Unfortunately, some of our bat species are in decline. This is due to a variety of reasons, and I'm going to tell you about two of the big reasons that we see happening in Georgia that are causing us to lose some of our bats. The first reason that our bats are in decline is habitat loss. Unfortunately, our bats are losing some of the vital habitat that they need to survive, and it's impacting some species more than others. Some of our species require very specific habitat types, such as this Raphanus big-eared bat. They like to roost in these large hollow trees and bottomland hardwood swamps, and unfortunately we've lost some of that habitat due to either the trees being cut down and used, or people building homes or stores in those areas, or those swamps losing their water. And so that is very detrimental to this species because they're pretty specific in their requirements. Some of our other species are more general in the habitats that they use, and they're more willing to live in more common areas that we may find, such as trees in people's yards or even abandoned buildings, and so they may live in bridges, and so those species seem to be doing a little better adjusting. White nose syndrome is one of our largest threats that we have to our bat species. This is a fungus that was first discovered in New York in the winter of 2006-2007, and it has since spread throughout the United States and caused millions of bats to die. To give you a little bit more background on white nose syndrome, as we discussed, it's a disease, and we typically see over 90% of the bats die once it gets to a cave site in the first few years of infection. In Georgia, we have seen a 93% decline in our caves since it arrived in the state in 2013. And several species are at risk of extinction. White nose syndrome has led to certain species being listed on the Endangered Species Act, or being currently considered for listing on the Endangered Species Act, because we've lost so many of them due to this disease. This disease kills our bats by causing them to wake up in the winter and use up their fat reserves. They wake up because they are irritated from the infection that it causes, and they are very active, and they don't have the ability to be that active because in the winter they only have so much reserved fat to help them survive. And this disease causes them to use all of that up, and then they die of dehydration or starvation, and sometimes of the infection itself. So you may be asking what we're doing in Georgia to combat these threats to our bats. Well, we do cave surveys every winter where we go to white nose positive sites and we monitor our bats at those sites to see how they're doing, to see if they have their population numbers changing, or if we have white nose syndrome in new sites that we think are currently negative for the fungus, because right now it's only in our North Georgia caves. We also will do this in culverts as well, and we're monitoring those sites because our bats roost there too. We also are monitoring our bats in the summer. We're looking at them in the summer to see if they're reproducing and how many pups they're having. And we're trying to get an idea of the habitats that they're using, and if we have some species moving into new areas that we didn't know they were in before, or some species that we're not seeing anymore because of white nose syndrome, if we can detect them in the summer. We do this through a variety of ways, such as putting up large nets to catch our bats called mist nets. We also will put up something called a harp trap outside of cave entrances to monitor our bats that way. And a third way is to record our bats acoustically. As we discussed earlier, our bats use echolocation to figure out what's happening in their environment, and this echolocation calls are unique to the species, and so we can record those and use those to identify what species we're encountering. Now you may be asking what's something that you can do to help our bats, and one of the best things that you can do is to put up a bat house. Bat houses are a great way to bring bats to your local home, and we recommend that you use an approved design. We recommend that you put your bat house in an area that has a lot of sunlight, and I'm asking for 6 to 8 hours of sunlight, preferably morning sun. Ideally, you'll put it in a habitat where there's cover nearby, such as a group of trees, and there's fresh water that's nearby, either from water that you provide or water that's in the environment, such as a pond or a river. And preferably the bat house will be 15 to 20 feet off the ground. If you can't get it that high, even just 10 to 12 feet may work, but they really like it to be very high up in the air. One of the reasons that bat houses are so great for you is because bats love to eat insects, and they can eat a lot of them. So bats can eat 50 to 100% of their body weight every night in insects, and this means a colony of 1,000 bats can eat 22 pounds of insects nightly. Now, I don't expect you to get 1,000 bats in your bat house, but every bat that you get will be very beneficial to you to help eat pests like mosquitoes and moths that are around your home, and they're also beneficial for agricultural purposes because bats love to eat pests that eat crops. It's estimated that we save billions of dollars a year because of this service and how beneficial bats are to controlling insect populations. Now you may be saying, okay, I can't put up a bat house, maybe I live in an apartment or somewhere that's not conducive. What else can I do to help our bats? You can also educate your friends and family about bats. You can remind them that bats are really important for our environment and that all of our bats in Georgia just eat insects, so you don't need to be afraid of them. But we still ask that you do not touch bats or pick them up. One of the other things you can do is provide fresh drinking water for bats. You can also keep your cats indoors because cats are very detrimental to many wildlife species such as birds and other small mammals, and not just bats. You can plant native plants. We have a list of native plants that we recommend on our website that are beneficial to bats and other local wildlife. And finally, you can support Georgia DNR in our efforts to conserve rare and endangered species by buying a license plate with a monarch butterfly on it. I want to thank you for taking a few minutes to listen to my talk today about bats in Georgia and the threats to them and what you can do to help them. If you have any more questions about bats in Georgia, you can refer to our website for a lot of great information and resources, and you can also contact me at my information listed here if you have any additional questions. Thank you.